Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. The air is still all smoky from those fires. So
Yeah, you're in California. Now, let me tell people a little about you and me. I'm Robert Wright. This is The Wright Show, available on both streaming video and audio podcasts. Now, you, believe it or not, Mickey, although I know it's your view that you need no introduction, maybe it wouldn't hurt, since you no longer grace our stage with the frequency that was once assumed. You are one of the co-founders of Blogging Heads TV, lo these many years ago.
I get half the credit. You did all the work. It's a good deal.
I encourage you to say that. By the way, good podcast about Stan Lee, the supposed genius behind Spider-Man, which kind of complicates that story, which it can be found on the Blogging Head site, involving Jeet here. And
podcast or a video thing?
What's that?
It's only a podcast. It's not a video thing?
No, it's also video. It's also video. But anyway, it's on Aria Cohen Wade's show, Culturally Determined, and it debunks the myth that Stan Lee deserves a whole bunch of credit for the whole Marvel, all the genius in Marvel Comics, much as you're trying to debunk the myth that you deserve much of any credit for Blogging Heads. Debunking I encourage, but let me tell people more about you. You are Mickey Kaus, famous blogging pioneer, and at some point you took a wrong turn and became a Trump supporter after long maintaining that you were a Democrat and a liberal, and so that's the backdrop for what we'll talk about today. Now I cede the stage to you.
I still think I'm a Democrat and a liberal, and I voted for Trump. I guess that makes me a Trump supporter.
Kind of, yeah.
And I reflexively defend him against all attacks, so I guess that makes me a Trump supporter.
Yeah, I would say.
But I wouldn't call myself a diehard Trump supporter. But anyway, okay.
So, yeah, so the fire's there. So even in Southern California, where is Paradise, California, by the way?
Paradise, it turns out, is in the north. It's north of Sacramento.
But you're getting it down where you are.
But there are fires down here, too. There are two fires down here.
Okay.
And there's a big, huge fire up there.
Okay.
That's bigger, but, people died in our fire down here, too. So it came this day after or the day of that horrible shooting in the valley. So it was a great day for Southern California.
It's getting to where they all blur together. I've forgotten that shooting. The country western shooting?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Aside from that, things are going great.
Yeah. It's kind of like the world right now. Aside from the fact that it's not going great, it's going great.
Is the world going so badly? I read in the Mindful Resistance newsletter, Bob, which you write, that the war in Yemen may have peace talks, and that would be a good thing. Isn't that the most brutal war going on?
Would be. That's far from a done deal, and you're right. I put out the Mindful Resistance newsletter with the help of an enthusiastic and talented team at mindfulresistance.net. People can sign up for the newsletter. We just passed the 12,000 subscriber mark, by the way. Email subscribers.
That's pretty good. I mean, if the upshot of the Khashoggi, I don't know how to pronounce his name, murder is that MBS is forced to stop the war in Yemen, that's a pretty good outcome, no?
It would be an outcome, a good outcome if it happened, and I think it does increase the pressure on him to cease and desist. Although it's not clear that he's going to. But yeah, I can't figure out whether, from my point of view, the optimal outcome is for him to actually step down, which I don't think he's going to do, and thus, free us from like a virtual, an extremely reckless, borderline crazy guy at the helm of an important country. Or it's better for him to stay there and keep the Saudi brand so kind of tainted and keep him so defensive that he's kind of coerced into doing less crazy stuff. I don't know.
As long as we're talking about him, we're talking about Mohammad bin Salman, is that his name?
Yeah.
MBS, who murdered this journalist, and now I'm going into demo mode, which I'm getting out of here.
Now, this is a blast from the past. So demo mode, Mickey, one of the more endearing things about you, what?
Go ahead.
You're actually using the original camera we got. We both had the same kind of Canon. We started this thing before there were webcams built into laptops. And
correct.
And so we
all the webcams built into laptops make me look like a fish. So I've gone back to the old Canon.
Right. Vanity has driven you back to the old technology, but it has this glitch called demo mode that used to happen every once in a while. And you should let it go through the full cycle next time to show people and to keep them viewing in anticipation of the moment. It is a sight to behold when it goes into demo mode. And
you're heading to a pineapple and it squashes you. And anyway.
You shouldn't even try to describe it. You will fall so far short of the glorious reality. But one of the more famous moments in early Blogging Heads history was Jonathan Chait getting caught in demo mode and his head like turning into a cube and revolving and everything.
I don't think he's gotten out of it, has he?
Well, why don't you elaborate on that metaphor, Mickey?
Anyway, people say why I'm sort of in the hard-ass camp in terms of punishing MBS for this murder, as opposed to Trump, who's in the we have to do business with this man mode. And people say, why are you so mad at MBS for killing somebody when you accept that Putin kills people routinely and yet you do business with Putin? And one answer is we have a chance to get rid of MBS because when the king dies, there will be a succession. And it's not at all clear that he will be the successor. If you read a Reuters story, buried in a Reuters story this week was that his relatives are conspiring to oust him after the king dies. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. You'd think they want to oust him before the king dies. After the king dies,
He's the king.
Are they going to have a civil war or something? And B, it's specific. It said the U.S. had specifically said they would be happy with this alternative. So there may be a method in Trump's madness, which is he's all nice to MBS in public, but behind the scenes, he's put in support for one of his rivals.
I was having a brief coughing fit that I, for the most part, suppressed technologically there. But I will soon rejoin the conversation, Mickey.
This is great.
Gives you a kind of an open mic night.
We have our meeting, and I just anyway, I just stopped short to give you time to respond.
I know. That was ill-timed graciousness on your part. So can you remind me what you just said so that I can respond?
I said that there may be method in Trump's madness because while he's appeasing MBS in public, in private, he may be telling MBS's rivals, we will support you if you choose to get rid of this guy. Which clearly they should. I mean, the sanction against him, it seems to me, is not going to be the United States imposing ponderous Russia-like sanctions on him, but it's going to be that no American businessman is going to want to do business with a murderer. He's toxic. He's damaged goods.
You think, although apparently a lot of corporations did show up to his little Davos in the desert thing. Of course, this was before it was quite so clear that he personally was behind the murder. But we'll
not
see.
That many people showed up.
What's that?
Not that many people showed up. Not that many American businessmen. Some other countries did.
Yeah, of course, Saudi Arabia, it's not like it's Egypt. It's not like it desperately needs the international, financial support. But
Eric Cantor went, proving his moral bona fides once and for all.
What's he doing these days?
He's making money on Wall Street, I think.
Yeah.
Apparently, they need some foreign advice. They want people. They have the money, but they don't have something that foreign businessmen can provide. And they need it, and so if we don't give it to them, maybe they'll find it somewhere else. But it might really damage him.
Well, I think they like the money. I mean, they spend a lot of the money that they get from oil, and on their people because they had set up this situation where basically if you're Saudi, you don't have to work. I don't know if that's still quite so true, but it was quite the social safety net. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, apparently even the neocons are split on whether he should stay or go, whether he's, so unstable that he can't even kind of carry out the policies that otherwise, they're in favor of if they're carried out competently. They're very much on the same page with him because he's, so anti-Iran. And by the way, this is there's a kind of a naivete surrounding a lot of the reporting about this, I think. Like, people are buying Trump's line that, well, we're staying in this relationship because they buy arms from us. Whereas there's a whole nother dimension to this, which is that we're staying in the relationship because we want to confront Iran. They help us confront Iran. Israel wants us to confront Iran along with them. Sheldon Adelson, Trump's main political financial backer, very much wants us to confront Iran. And I think that it has actually more to do with Iran than with arms sales.
Sure, but what about also with the Israeli possibility of peace in Israel?
Trump may be so naive to think that Jared Kushner could cook something up that would stand a chance of working on that front.
I think they're hoping that Saudi Arabia will sort of force the Palestinians to give in on several key points. What do I know? I only survived.
What kind of leverage?
I only survived at the New Republic by not knowing anything about the Middle East.
Don't do anything, Mickey. You've gone into demo mode. Let them see it in its full glory. Don't do it. There. It's reached its climax, but now here comes the cube. Oh, yes, the revolving cube. See, now this is going to drive the audio podcast listeners straight to the actual website, bloggingheads.tv, or the YouTube channel. Oops. There you go.
Sorry. Is it over now?
Okay, you should get out of it now.
Did I put myself out of my misery? Thank you. So I thought don't they have some heft in I assume they subsidize everything in sight. They don't give any money to the Palestinians?
I suppose they do, although, I'm sure they do, and I'm sure they certainly can. They can offer them a ton of money. But of course, the big Trump allegation is that, a lot of support for the more militant parts of the Palestinian cause come from Iran. I don't know actually what the finances are, but it just seems like anything Jared Kushner signs off on is going to be so degrading from the point of the Palestinians that it's a political non-starter. It's just not going to happen.
I'm surprised you haven't gone to the main. Well, first point is Trump always seems to harp on the cheesy rationale that you and I don't find effective, as in it's all about the arms sales.
Right.
Or with the migrant caravan, instead of saying we can't let everybody in the world come and just walk into our country because they want to, and they're low-wage workers who are making a life harder for the hardest up American workers, he has to say that there are Middle Eastern terrorists in there because I guess pollsters tell him that gives an extra pop. It reminds me of when Bush supported his first Iraq war by saying it's all about jobs. No, it wasn't about jobs, but somebody told him that would have an effect. So he's
now you want Trump to say it is about jobs, as opposed to saying it's about war.
No, I want him to say the oil thing is totally legit. They have heavy influence on the price of oil. And
that is total bullshit. That is total bullshit. I'm sorry.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
This is the longest standing. First of all, if we're so damn concerned about oil prices, how about lift the sanctions on Iran? But of course, for ideological reasons, he's not going to do that. But secondly, in general, maybe this isn't quite the same thing, but much too much emphasis in terms of justifying our relationship with countries like Saudi Arabia has been placed on the fact that they are oil producers. As if we need to stay on good terms with them for oil prices to stay low, right? I mean, if they don't sell their oil to us, but sell it to someone else, the global price of oil remains the same. So we buy it from someone else instead of them. The price is the same. Now, it's true that right now we're in a slightly different situation, which is because of the sanctions on Iran, Trump may prevail on Saudi Arabia to pump more oil than they would otherwise pump to keep prices low. But in general, go ahead.
I thought that their low cost of production, lower than anybody else, gave them effective control over the price that other market players don't normally have. So if they want to cut the price, way below the market, they could do that, and they could still make money. So they basically have their finger on the spigot. Am I wrong?
I think the main reason they have their finger on the spigot is they just have so much damn oil that, first of all, if they can't keep OPEC together, that they have much more limited influence. I mean, the main theoretical influence that they have is if they can get OPEC to actually stay on the same page and agree to some kind of production curb. If they can't, if they're the only ones doing it right now, I just don't think that's going to drive prices very high. Right now, prices are plummeting. The U.S. famously has become much more in the way of both an oil producer and a natural gas producer than was anticipated 15 years ago. So that is I think a bigger red herring than the arms sale talk, the oil talk, personally. At least at this point in the history of oil prices.
Okay, well, I stand corrected, but why can't he just say they're a valuable ally in the Middle East? If we're ever going to get American troops home, we need their help.
How are they going to help us get American troops home?
By settling everything.
Yeah, they're super good at settling things. Ask the people at Yemen. I think that haven't the people of Yemen, like, in unison nominated MBS for the Nobel Peace Prize, or am I confused? I mean, this guy is a disaster. Disaster.
Isn't it conceivable that we could put so much pressure on Iran that they would pull back from Syria, which would enable us to bring troops home?
We could bring troops home now. They are not destabilizing Syria. What do you think is the connection between the presence of Iranian troops, and a lot of it is actually Iranian proxies, but what do you think the connection is between the presence of Iranian troops in Syria and our need to have troops in Syria? What is that connection?
I thought we have troops in Syria to counter the Iranian presence.
Well, we do, but not for our own self-interest. It's because Israel wants them there. In terms of our own actual, what?
If they went away, then the cause would be removed.
Well, nominally, but, first of all, I think Israel is confused in thinking that they are some kind of mortal threat. I think from Iran's point of view, they are there for defensive purposes. Secondly, what right do we have to say that a country cannot have troops stationed in an allied country? Syria's government wants the troops there. Okay, so every time, and there is word, by the way, that Israel is, before terribly long, going to launch another big bombing raid on these installations. What right do we or Israel, anyone else, have to bomb troops that are stationed in an allied country at the invitation of the allied country?
You and Ann Coulter are reading from the same page.
Does she actually say that? This is the first good thing she said, if so.
No, she wants to bring she's repeatedly said we should bring the troops home from Syria.
Well, that's not even what I'm saying right now. I'm just saying we have, I will say, we have no right to have troops there. Syrian government doesn't want them there. That is an ongoing act of war on our part. You're going into demo mode. I
think everything I say in demo mode has extra weight.
I think no one watching this pays any attention to what you're saying because the visuals are so amazing.
You were distinguishing yourself from Ann Coulter.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to bring the troops home, and I would point out that we have no business under international law having them there. It is an act of war to have them there because the Syrian government doesn't want them there, and it's their country. But, that's not so much my emphasis. My emphasis is on the craziness of either us or Israel, like bombing Iranian installations in Syria, not to mention its flagrant violation of international law. and it's lack of necessity, because Iran is not going to launch an unprovoked attack on Israel. Not going to happen today, tomorrow, ever.
So maybe the conclusion is we don't need Saudi Arabia that much, and we should cut MBS loose.
I could live with that, but yeah, no, I don't think we need Saudi Arabia.
If the oil isn't the reason, and Middle East peace isn't the reason, and Iran isn't the reason, why the hell are we so, desperate for Saudi Arabia's friendship?
Because, I mean, at the moment, there's also the answers with other presidents, but at the moment, it's because we want them to help us confront Iran, which, as I've noted, is both a bad idea and, given the mode of confrontation, a flagrant violation of international law. But that's the key thing here, is that Trump is on a jihad against Iran. John Bolton, even Mattis, who is closer to the sane end of the spectrum than Bolton by a long shot, is kind of an Iran hater. Pompeo is a total Iran hater. It's like the stars are all aligned for us to confront Iran. So, that's why we're not going to I think that's the main reason we're not going to let go of Saudi Arabia.
Anyway, the second point I was going to make is you haven't gone into the main paranoid reason why people think Jared is beholden to the Saudis or Trump. People on the left think he's being one or both of them is being paid off. I don't believe it. I have no evidence for it. It's a total
being paid off by whom?
The Saudis.
Oh, that he's being paid off by the Saudis?
Correct. You're not up on your left-wing conspiracies.
No, I'm not. I think they were his real estate company was courting Arab money at one point, but not from the Saudis. It was, and I'm not so much deeply into that conspiracy theory. Jared, look, Bibi Netanyahu literally slept at Jared Kushner's house when Kushner was a kid. Okay, so he just fits into this whole anti-Iran thing naturally. That's where the politics of his parents are. That's where his politics are. Okay, well, we will abjure crazy left-wing conspiracy theories after bringing them to light, so you can make up your own mind. Yeah, no, I much prefer my brand of conspiracy theory. So we've done with MBS. Yeah, we've done with MBS, and so we should say we're actually taping this on the eve of Thanksgiving. It won't air for a few days, which means that we're probably best advised to spend this doing some kind of retrospective, less time-sensitive stuff about the Trump presidency. And who better to argue about the merits of Trump's presidency than you and I? I will say one thing, every time we talk about this, you go, well, what happened to this idea that he's Hitler? He hasn't sent stormtroopers into your neighborhood or anything. And what I say is yeah, but the inclination is there. It's just that the opportunity hasn't arisen. And I would say we have seen more evidence just in the last few days of the inclination. Apparently, he really wanted to lock Hillary Clinton up. He really said, I want to prosecute her and put her in jail. That's mind-blowing, right? You admit. Now, Mickey, would you admit that inclination is itself, the fact that if it's true that he actually wanted to do that, that's crazy and mind-blowing? Before we get there, not only he did not have the means to do it. He may have. I agree. He had the inclination. Okay, a lot, but he it's not that he didn't have the opportunity. He doesn't have the means. He doesn't have any troops. He has nobody who will carry out that order. Hitler had brown shirts all over the country. Okay. But he's getting there with the acting attorney general. He's a lot closer. He couldn't even get his counsel to go along with it. The second point is it depends what she's guilty of. Everybody says only banana republics jail their political opponents. Well, it depends what the political opponent is guilty of. I agree. Hillary's emails seem to be a total non-scandal to me. Even if she weren't Hillary, I wouldn't prosecute her for it. And people who aren't Hillary aren't prosecuted for it. It's a completely bogus, trivial scandal. But you can't have a blanket rule saying you can never jail your opponent. It depends what the opponent did. But wait, Mickey. Surely you agree that no one who's been president in our lifetime, and for us that starts with Eisenhower probably, no president prior to Trump, given whatever degree of criminality is involved in this email thing, or even a somewhat higher degree of criminality, no previous president would try to jail the person they ran against in the election precisely because they would understand like what the implications for that are, the vibe it gives off, the implications for future American politics. Don't you agree? No previous president would try to do that. That we, in our lifetime, I don't know, like Andrew Jackson, whatever, but don't you agree?
Even Nixon?
Yeah, even Nixon. Unless it were a matter of political preservation or something, maybe for Nick, but that's not what it is. It's just, in fact, it's the opposite. It would have hurt him politically. He's just so damn vindictive and crazy, you know. So
he obviously doesn't have conventional inhibitions in that respect. On the other hand, Woodrow Wilson did jail Eugene Debs, I believe.
Did Eugene Debs run against him?
He ran for president at some point. I don't know if he ran against Wilson.
Okay, so back to the question. No president in our lifetime, you agree, would try this?
No, I don't agree. I think I don't know about Nixon, and I don't know. You know, everybody wants to jail the Clintons, so I don't know if any.
And then just like only yesterday, or maybe 4 or 5 days ago, as people watch this, he starts talking about how I'm not going to, whatever the implication was, this stuff of filing cases, lawsuits against the government in the Ninth Circuit, that's going to stop, or something's going to stop. He even got rebuked by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who was appointed by a Republican, Mickey. Come on, this is like Crazyville. He has got all the makings of a banana republic president. It's just that the circumstances aren't auspicious to actually become one.
I agree that the motivation is there, but the circumstances aren't and were never going to be auspicious, so we were right to discount that threat. So
you agree that by nature he is a fascist?
This just proves my point. This scandal, it didn't happen. He got stopped. As Mona Charen, a never Trumper, said, it was a temper tantrum. It was not the most egregious act of authoritarianism in our lifetime.
Well, no, because he didn't get away with it. But as I said last time, if some huge disaster afflicts the country, like another 9/11, all bets are off. I mean, if a sufficiently grave threat occurs, he is poised to exploit it, to gather power into his hands in a very nefarious way. Now, probably won't. These things usually don't happen.
He's poised to try, but he doesn't have the means. He will not be able to pull it off.
Well, not now. But again, if the country can be put in a sufficiently defensive mindset, and he's trying to do that all the time, rush the troops to the border to stop the caravan and so on, if an actual major thing, like even bigger than 9/11 happens, he will try to abuse his power in a way we have never seen, believe me.
Yes, nobody who will follow his orders, even in the military. And I do note that both Bush and Obama sent troops to the border. Bush for a very long time. They sent them in July before an election, not in October. Well, so big deal.
In terms of...
And it was completely appropriate because the whole caravan was sort of a macho challenge to Trump. You're going to back down. And he was responding in a macho way.
And it had nothing to do with the election? It had nothing to do with the election?
Oh, it sure had a lot to do with the election. So what?
Well, I thought, okay. I thought you had a different explanation.
The threat you've been warning about for years happens to materialize a month before the election. You're kind of crazy not to point that out, It shows you were right. So
I'm talking about
our defective borders a month before the election. Trump's not supposed to react to that?
Let me just say one more thing.
Because it's too close to the election?
Let me just say one more thing about the authoritarianism thing. You say, he doesn't have the people who would cooperate. Well, he just got rid of an attorney general who would probably not cooperate and replaced him with a guy who actually might well, A. B, James Mattis is defense secretary now, but who knows for how long? And we know that Trump will do his best to put in some kind of, mindless loyalist if he can, because that's what he's done with Attorney General, and that's just what he likes to do.
Speaking of mindless loyalists, there has been no greater move toward banana republic, third world autocratic rule in my lifetime than Bush trying to put Harriet Miers on the court. That was a total banana republic move, much worse than anything Trump has done. If Trump tries the equivalent of putting Harriet Miers on the court with the Defense Department, you might have a case. But Bush did it and was luckily rebuffed. And Trump has not tried to do that. He's putting his own personal family servant on the court.
Well, with Harriet Miers, I didn't look into the details of that. But my sense was always that, like, I didn't know what was going on there because she was so plainly unqualified when you heard her open her mouth, right? I mean, it was bizarre.
I think she's probably competent and a lovely woman, but she's the house lawyer, you know? She's like the servant.
I thought, and with Bush, I think this is credible. My impression was just he really liked her. He just thought, what a lovely, she's a good Christian woman or whatever she was, and doesn't she belong on the court?
Right, but if anybody told him, no, George, you can't do that, he ignored it and he did it. When people told Trump, you can't prosecute Hillary, he backed down.
Yeah, but it's a very different. If I'm right about why Bush appointed Miers, we're talking about a very different impulse to begin with. Now, Mickey, you know what you should do?
It's all one. Harriet Miers is nice. The whole Bush clan runs on loyalty. Loyalty is never far from their mind. So if she thinks Harriet Miers is nice, that incorporates, and Harriet Miers won't be nasty to us.
Like, what is your grand sizing up of the Trump presidency, like, nearly 2 years after he took office? Like, what? Disappointments, gratifications, or just like macro assessments? Sure.
He hasn't changed and become more presidential, so everybody agrees with that. And he's unlikely to change since he hasn't yet. He has been surprisingly responsible, however, in his big choices, in his Supreme Court appointments and his Fed appointment. It's hard to argue that he was irresponsible there.
Well, he had a narrow Senate majority to work with. I mean, Collins and Murkowski could have sabotaged any judge.
Yes, if you gave Trump total power over America, it would be bad. But given that he's hemmed in, it's more than that, Bob, because part of his problem is he has this innate desire to please the elite, even as he attacks it. So that brings me to the third point, which is...
I don't buy that. I mean, he just appointed the opposite of the acting attorney general you would appoint if he wanted to get in good with the elites.
That's an exception. That's an existential
John
threat
Bolton.
to him
John Bolton, a national security advisor. Even the Blob doesn't like John Bolton.
The conservative nomenclatura doesn't like John Bolton?
Well, I would say far enough right, fine. But first of all, I think even the neocons are probably somewhat split on Bolton because Bolton is such a wild man. And secondly, I thought you said he wanted to please the elite broadly. Well, the whole kind of center to left of center part of the foreign policy establishment hates Bolton, and some of the right hates him.
That's a good point. But anyway, he staffed his administration with Goldman Sachs people, which you wouldn't expect. He likes people with Harvard and Yale degrees. There's a lot of evidence that he likes, sucking up, likes.
Lawrence Kudlow was not popular among financial elites. It was like a joke appointment. He's a TV commentator.
Right, but his he was the late arrival. The initial appointments were all Goldman Sachs people.
Well, okay, but
a lot of whom have left.
Right, but we're 2 years into his presidency, and the examples I just cited seem to me to complicate the argument that he spends all his time trying to please elites.
No, his initial impulse was to please the elites. Now the elites have left, and no more elites want to go work for him. So he's got to reach deeper down into the field.
Okay.
I half expect him to ask Tina Powell to come back any day now. I think he probably already has. But Kudlow's an effective television spokesman, so that's his main job for Trump, and he's very good at it. So it's not clear that that's a bad choice from Trump's point of view.
No, it just was not an elite pleasing choice. Yeah, is all I'm saying.
His main defect is that he felt he appointed all these people who opposed his agenda certainly on immigration and probably also on trade. And he felt the need to somehow go along with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell on the Hill, which would have been fine if he'd said, okay, you get to pass your agenda and I get to pass my agenda. Instead, he passed their agenda, tax cuts, and tried to repeal Obamacare. They did not agree to his agenda, and he just left it there. That's the way it is. He never forced them to say, Paul, if you want your tax cuts, I need my wall, or I need this, then that reform in the immigration laws. So he let himself get completely hornswoggled. I mean, there were really people 2 months ago who were saying, oh, no, President Trump, you'll get more money for the wall after the midterms in which the Democrats are going to win. Sure, right. Tell us about it. So they're about to put him off and put him off and put him off until he realizes he has nothing. So he completely misplayed that. The key moment, the key gut check for him was this omnibus bill, which gave the establishment the defense boost they wanted and gave the establishment the tax cuts they wanted and completely screwed him on the wall. It forbade him from spending any money on the wall. It was worse than the legal situation before he took office. And he had an impulse to rebel against it, and then he caved. And that was it. That was he failed his gut check. So, everything since then is scrambling to make up for that screw up. And he may come up with something. And the fourth thing is, but the economy is good. He's managed to keep a lid on immigration. If imagine how many people would be coming in if Trump weren't president and the economy were as hot as it is. So wages at the bottom would be...
Well, actually, not many were coming in under Obama, and the economy was humming along pretty well. But
no, the economy was not humming until the end, and 2014 was a huge year for immigration.
Well, steady economic growth.
And there was... yes, but it wasn't crazy growth like under Trump or in the late 90s when immigration had its biggest spike.
Well, so, we've had the argument plenty of times about the mode by which Trump is discouraging immigration, which I think is more inhumane than an actual wall would be. Border security.
His new mode is less inhumane.
What is the new mode?
The new mode is he's trying to force people to ports of entry, and then he's only letting them in slowly in the ports of entry. So he's metering them, as they say, and so they have to wait for months and months and months and months outside the port of entry to get in. But
that is a new mode. I'm talking about his mode that leads millions of people who are already in America to live in fear. But we've had that argument. But who are the people in his administration that you're saying he ill-advisedly appointed who are meaningfully obstructing him on immigration in his administration? Because he clearly appointed, Stephen Miller, Jeff Sessions. He had a lot of supporters.
That's true.
Peter Navarro, isn't he a supporter?
He's a supporter on trade. I don't know what his line is on immigration.
Well, who thwarted him? Who actually thwarted him on immigration? I would think John Kelly's fine with restrictionism.
There are Kelly is surprisingly good. There a lot of people say Nielsen is way too soft, and the whole hierarchy at DHS is way too soft. Jared, Ivanka, Dina Powell. They're Nikki Haley.
What did they keep him from doing that he otherwise would have done? Did they give him the advice on congressional maneuvers that you said were stupid, or was it something else?
Bizarrely, Nielsen supposedly advised him not to sign the bill. So she, in theory, and you don't know whether that's true or not, or just PR. In theory, she gave good advice. But Mark Short is another terrible one. His congressional liaison from the Koch brothers, which is their pro-amnesty, loose immigration outfit, and he was completely ineffective in terms of negotiating anything pro-Trump on Trumpist on immigration. So he's like he's one of the main screw-ups.
So I should have added it in the introduction at the very beginning that the issue that far more than any other has led you to be a supporter of Trump is immigration, as people may have gathered by now. But what else? Is there anything that, let's see. Are there any criticisms of Trump from the left or from the resistance that you admit are valid and substantial? And
from the resistance?
Your criticisms come from the right. It's like he's not hard or effective enough in stopping immigration. I mean criticisms.
Well, I've already given one criticism, which is he goes for these cheesy, sensationalist PR moves instead of saying there's a caravan coming in. We have to, we can't let this huge hole be driven in our immigration laws, or else anybody can walk in, and there are 1 billion people who walk in. He says, well, they're criminals from the Middle East. So he has this sort of instinct towards cheesy demagoguery that a lot of presidents had, including the Bushes. The Bushes did that all the time.
That bothers you, I think. Okay, but I think even that bothers you mainly because it undermines his effectiveness on immigration because it makes him look clownish on the subject, right?
That's not valid.
Well, you're not exactly subscribing to the criticism from the left because you're not buying into the motivation behind it.
He should never have acceded to Paul Ryan's agenda, which is not popular and not right.
Okay, but Mickey, every complaint of yours is about his failure to successfulnot execute the immigration policy you'd like, which fine.
No,
that's fine. It's just that I ask you to go out of character.
Not at all. I'm saying he shouldn't have tried to dismantle Obamacare. He should have tried to fix Obamacare. And I tend to say we should supersede Obamacare with some sort of universal Medicare system.
Okay.
Or he should have gone to the left on healthcare. In fact, he ran a campaign where he said he was going to go to the left on entitlements. And he has sort of held the line in terms of cuts on Social Security, but on healthcare, he did not. And the result was a disaster. That's what a lot of what the midterms were about, that Paul Ryan gave him the rope that hung them with the pre-existing conditions thing.
Yeah, well, this is kind of the Bannon critique, right? That he should have gone left-wing populist as much as right-wing populist.
Right, and he should have come up with some sort of infrastructure investment. The worst that happens is it wastes money.
Yeah.
And it probably wouldn't waste money. I agree with that. Dan.
Well, and so the initial thing said about him that was true was, he's not a master strategist and he lacks focus, right? He just can't. He's just too reactive to sustain any kind of coherent strategy.
I haven't figured out if he's lazy. He doesn't seem to pay a lot of attention to the details. If Clinton was doing the equivalent of the immigration bill, he would want to know what each version of the bill said about the things he cared about.
Yeah. And
I think Trump sort of lets his aides lie to him and fumfo him along, and then all of a sudden he wakes up an hour before he has decided and says, "What? That isn't here? Why didn't you tell me?" So he that's just dereliction of duty. That's just not doing his job.
Yeah.
So he may be guilty of that. He seems to have a lot of energy. He doesn't sleep. He's always doing something. So you can't really say he's lazy, but he doesn't seem to spend a lot of time on the tedious details.
Although it does sometimes happen that people who spend much of their waking hours watching TV are called lazy, Mickey. And that's what he does.
Watching TV is work for him.
Okay, because it gets him worked up, you mean?
I don't know. This idea, this strategy of his that he always has to be in the news, and if there's not a controversy that day, he'll make one up.
I think
he's very good at pushing bad news off the front page.
It is,
but
it's good at two things. It does that. I think it's basically just an instinct. I don't know that it's a thought out strategy. He just can't stand to not be the center of attention, but it does have these two effects. One is pushing bad news off the page. It's like the Jim Acosta thing pushed the firing of Jeff Sessions off of the front of Twitter, so to speak, right?
And the midterm election.
Yeah, and so there's that, and but it also draws it draws the resistance into attacking him in ways that fire up his base. I mean, even that Acosta video, like, it's like when I imagine the way that whole Acosta thing is playing out in his base, if you look at the two videos, the doctored one and the non-doctored one, there's not a super glaring difference, right? I mean, am I alone in like having to really focus to see the difference? So you can imagine if you're favorable to Trump, you're going to look at these two videos and go, the resistance is making this up, right?
There's one theory that the second one wasn't doctored. It was just the translation from one mode to the other and produced a glitch, not unlike the glitches that are probably going to afflict this broadcast.
But it just wasn't that dramatic, right? The difference.
Right. Although it did look like he was sort of doing a little karate.
A little more, but again, if you're... Yeah, okay.
Not that different from Obama. I mean, Obama loved to provoke the right into craziness. That's why he didn't release his birth certificate until 2 years later, because he wanted to like let them go crazy and make fools.
That's conjectural. Obama didn't do this with nearly the frequency that Trump did. Nothing
I think
like
it was talked about in the White House as a definite strategy. I don't think it was made up.
On the birth certificate thing?
On a lot of different controversies, he would just let the right wingers go berserk. But it wasn't really to fire up.
That's what they were doing. He didn't have to provoke them. They just did that. They just made shit up. He didn't like start the birth certificate thing. They just made shit up.
But he could have released the birth certificate a lot earlier and put it to rest. Instead, he let them boil.
Right, but that's different from choosing. That's different from choosing to amp up the controversy, like when Trump says we're taking away Jim Acosta's press credentials.
Correct.
I mean, I just think there's like no comparison between these two guys on that score. But I agree, a lot of it is more effective. I think much of the resistance still does not understand how effective a lot of this stuff is in sustaining the loyalty and energy of Trump's base. They don't understand what's happening.
Right. But the base is not enough to win the presidency. It's enough to keep.
No, and I think in the end, don't you think in the end the Republican establishment probably, by and large, looked at the midterm results and, if anything, had more second thoughts about Trump than before? I mean, you know, it was, given how strong the economy is, I can't think that election led all these Republicans in Congress to say, yeah, I'm really feeling good about having jumped on board this particular train, right?
Well, if they're still in Congress, they're pretty happy. A lot of them aren't in Congress anymore.
Well, yeah,
it's clear to me. It's clear to me that the establishment plan was all along was just to wait Trump out and not to be creative in any way. So this probably just gives them.
But a lot of them have identified themselves closely with him. I mean, Mitch McConnell will forever be thought of as a Trump ally.
Really? I think I consider him a Trump opponent at the moment.
You kidding? I mean, what?
I don't know. He's blocked the wall. He's blocked the wall for 2 years.
Well, that's not
He wanted judges. He got his judges. He didn't give Trump what he wanted. So how is that on Trump's team?
I don't know, but that's not the mainstream perception, I don't think, that Mitch McConnell is really providing a lot of friction.
The mainstream has gone berserk in terms of they have nothing better to do than to try to shame Republicans who go along with Trump in any way. I see that as just a way to bide time until the next election.
Yeah, well, what do you think about the whole...
There's a column every week, so he can't,
Who does?
Jonathan Chait, he can pick a different Republican every week to shame for going along with Trump.
John is not on board the mindful resistance bandwagon, I must say. he's on board the reactive resistance bandwagon. So what do you think of the whole tribalism thing? That's become like a buzzword.
What you mean is tribalism? I was thinking about it. I can't think of one Trump supporter who has had the sort of the moment that anti-Trumpers are waiting for and say, I renounce Trump. It turns out he's as bad as they say. And I can't think of any anti-Trumper, I'm sure there are, who've had the moment where they say, Trump's not that bad, I'm on board. I guess Lindsey Graham maybe. But I'm talking about non-elected officials who don't have the incentive to go along with Trump. I don't know if they're precious few of them.
Well, wait, are you talking about on the Republican side?
Yeah.
I mean, all of National Review, which at one point proudly declared themselves part of the resistance, right? Remember, they editorialized against Trump, and now they're totally in his pocket. They're totally in his pocket.
They had a whole special issue.
Right. They had a special issue opposing Trump, and then once he's president, they're like, what can we do for you, sir?
Well, but they never said they were they never said they were never Trump. They were just opposed to it, and they lost. So
well, you would think to read that issue, I'll bet you could find lines from that editorial the National Review wrote against Trump that would have suggested that they were never going to fall in line with him, and certainly not as rapidly as they did.
Why not? And I'm sure, like people like Jonah Goldberg and David French, is that his name, would say they're still very much opposed to Trump.
Yeah, well, I think they're not. Yeah, and I guess both of them are associated with National Review. But I mean, if you just look at Rich Lowry's Twitter feed, it's like, pretty much entirely pro-Trump.
Yeah,
and he's the editor of National Review.
Actually, he doesn't run the thing anymore. But yes.
But he is nominally the editor. Who actually runs it?
He's nominally the editor. I'm sort of impressed with him, how he can generate timely and useful columns week after week.
He's a smart guy, but who is actually running the magazine?
I thought Rayhan was, or Rayhan for a while, but I guess not anymore. So I don't know.
There's an interesting case. You know what I'd love to know? I'd love to know is where does National Review get its money? No one knows, right?
They have cruises. They have they have a network of well-coiffed donors.
Cruises. See, that's what I've been missing out on. I'm going to do a cruise.
My line is that William Crystal's punishment for being so wrong would be he has to go on a cruise and never come back.
Now, Bill Kristol is a fascinating phenomenon, of course.
Not come back until the administration is over.
There is this. What do you make of this whole thing? Bill Kristol, David Frum, Jennifer Rubin, Max Boot, all these people we thought of as neocons, like not only moving into the resistance, but I think largely abandoning their previous ideology on domestic policy. Am I overstating that? And it probably differs from character to character.
I haven't followed them that closely because that would mean that would suggest that I care about them. I do care about Frum. I think Frum's for one thing. Frum is still on board on immigration. But has Max Boot renounced the Iraq War? I think he has.
Oh, I think so. I mean, Max Boot has just almost claimed that he was like possessed and he's been exorcised and now he's like a likable guy. Everything I believed before, I don't know what made me say it. It's crazy.
Has he called for troops out of Syria?
He certainly fairly early on said, we can't do regime change. I don't mean super early on, but I mean, a while ago said we have to acknowledge civil war's over, blah blah blah. I mean, his transformation, if that's what it is, has been pretty thoroughgoing. But I think in all these cases, I don't know about David Frum, but I think in most of these cases has involved a fair amount of movement on domestic policy. I mean, I think David Frum quite some time ago probably started that, but I think for a lot of these people, it's more recent.
Given that everybody should move to the left on many issues like healthcare, I can hardly criticize them for doing that if they do it.
Yeah.
So,
Now,
when I did a blogging heads with from the Republican convention in 2016, and I looked like a little old Jewish man. I had like gray hair and everything, and it became clear to me. I said, "Why do you hate Trump so? Why do you hate Trump so much?" And it became clear that he was worried about what happened in Poland and Hungary happening here.
That's interesting.
That was the gist of it. It was not Israel. It was not Hitler. It was Poland.
I mean, that's what a lot of his writing has been about. I mean, is the threat of fascism.
Well, autocracy. He wouldn't say it's fascism.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, authoritarianism.
Orban-like authoritarianism, where you sort of cow the press and you play on anti-immigrant sentiment and racism, et cetera, is what he would be worried about, and he has enough grist. I don't think it's very persuasive, but he has enough grist to keep that fear alive. I mean, so that I think in his case that's what's driving him. I don't know about the other people.
Yeah. So, and then should I try to say
Jennifer Rubin is a big pro-immigration person. I always think it's always about immigration, but in her case, it might.
Should I be trying to say something sympathetic about Trump since I asked you to say something critical?
Yes.
Let me work on it. I think I've already told you that the thing the NAFTA, the movement of NAFTA toward the left, I approve of. Some of the labor regulations that are going to apply to Mexico. I mean, the interesting wage provisions that requires that a certain amount of the parts in each car be made by workers who make at least $16 an hour, and things involving unionization in Mexico. I'm on board there. I mean, I would also say that, like, some of his crazy talk on trade and his saber rattling, that's not like inherently bad. That it can be a good bargaining tactic to do that. It can be a good bargaining tactic to act crazy. Famously in the annals of game theory, there can be virtue in people thinking you're crazy and will do anything.
He's referred to that.
He is
self-conscious on his part.
Yeah, but that said, again, as with domestic policy, there's just a lack of strategic vision. So with China, I mean, the funny thing about China is the mainstream, the establishment of trade policy in America agrees that China needs to be coerced into revising certain aspects of its trade policy, notably on intellectual property. But they also agree that if you're going to confront them most effectively, you need to get Europe with you and do it with Europe in unison rather than antagonize Europe on trade while unilaterally confronting China, right? So we'll see what happens there, but he's clearly not taking the most effective path.
I defer to Alan Toddleson on matters of trade, and I was just looking at his Twitter feed, and he cites an article by somebody at The Guardian or some European publication, an economist who says we're actually winning the trade war against China because our tariffs are actually intelligently targeted, and while we are paying 6% more for certain consumer goods, Chinese exporters are taking a hit of 20%, and they're hurting them much more than they're hurting us. And they're a communist state. What they're terrified of.
No, they're not a communist state. They're run by a party that's called the Communist Party. That's the only communist thing about.
There's some sort of weird successor to the communist state.
They're an authoritarian state with a statist capitalist economy.
Right, but they have a whole party structure, which
it's one party rule. Yeah,
in the concept of being statist. Anyway, they if they don't deliver economic growth, I would assume they are in trouble in a way that American elites are not in trouble if they don't deliver economic growth.
That is true, but you should not underestimate the power of nationalism anywhere in this day and age. And, it's common to assume that authoritarian leaders don't need to worry about what their people think. And that is completely confused. I mean, just because it's not a democracy doesn't mean he doesn't worry night and day about the people considering him a legitimate leader that they're proud of. I'm talking about Xi in China. And one thing Trump does that makes it harder for leaders to make accommodation with him on anything is be an asshole and like tweet about them and stuff. So at this point, the Chinese leadership has its backup. It's back up, 2 words. I may have a backup plan as well or something, but it's really, and you saw this in this recent summit in where was that, Australia or something? No, it was in New Guinea, I think. So I think Trump has nurtured political forces in China that make it harder for China to make concessions. In any event, at this point, it's looking like something of a standoff. I mean, we'll see. It's the same with Iran. I mean, Iran is determined to ride this thing out and hope that Trump's not president in 2 years. And I don't think I just don't think you're going to see Iran do the things that Trump wants. And by the way, attacking them in Syria is going to make it only harder as a political matter for them to make concessions.
Well, but there's domestic opposition to their Syrian involvement. So
to the what?
There's domestic opposition in Iran to their spending so much money getting involved in Syria. So
there probably is some of that, but
if you make it costly, then that might give them more of an argument.
Yeah, I don't know what the spectrum of opinion is on that, but I think once you attack their people, once you kill Iranians, you're definitely changing the political landscape in a way that discourages accommodation. And also just the way, all the rhetoric that directed toward everybody, toward Canada, toward Macron. I mean, it just all makes accommodation harder.
Then he makes up for it with a slobbering suck up at the end.
It's just such. I think I think one reason that if the Democrats can put up a decent candidate, they'll win is that everybody's just sick of it. I mean, it's just like. I just like my life, it's just all the Sturm and Drang. I just think people can, but speaking of which, do you see an effective Democratic presidential candidate coming along?
Well, Sherrod Brown is the one the right wing is scared of.
I haven't seen much of him. I just get a sense for the gravelly voice, and that's a good thing. A gravelly voice is good.
The general tendency, he's enough of a populist that he can win a large chunk of the white working class, and if he does that, Trump is dead. So that's the argument on both sides. There's been a flurry of publicity for him recently.
Yeah, I know.
I know nothing about him. I like Cory Booker, even though
please,
some of his histrionics are questionable.
Don't call him Cory. Call him Spartacus.
Sporadicus. There were all sorts of. There were all sorts of plays on Spartacus, but yes, I just like him because he was strong on choice.
Well, I will say that during the Kavanaugh hearings, he was the only senator to point out, albeit too briefly, that Kavanaugh, in claiming that all the witnesses had refuted Ford, was speaking in error. It was flatly wrong. I mean, this is what every Democratic senator should have said. They should have said, look, we're not going to put a guy in the Supreme Court who mischaracterizes evidence. Cory Booker was the only guy who spent even a moment on that. And the rest of them just wasted all their time.
I thought that argument was iffy on both sides. I mean, what they didn't corroborate it doesn't mean they refuted it. Well, you would expect them to know enough to corroborate it, right? So,
no, wait, Mickey. The point is to refute the allegation, you would have to say, I don't think, I have reason to believe the attempted rape or whatever, the assault didn't take place. All two of them said was, I don't recall being at a party like that. That's all they said. And they didn't say the party didn't happen. They didn't even say for sure they weren't there. And the only two other witnesses were the ones accused of doing it.
I'm not sure that refute doesn't cover introduce some evidence that goes against as opposed
to no way. And in fact, there was one time when he said it even more strongly. If you go look at, I'll tell you what, we will link to the little fragment I wrote about this in the Mindful Resistance newsletter. We will link directly to that. And believe me, he egregiously mischaracterized evidence. The other thing the Democrats should have said repeatedly, every one of them should have said this, is we're not saying that he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of doing this. We're saying that this introduces reasonable doubt. I mean, both the seemingly credible allegation, which is consistent with his subsequent drunken behavior in college and so on, but both that and the mischaracterization of evidence and the temperamental question raised by his testimony, all of this raises reasonable doubt about his qualifications to sit on the Supreme Court. And if there's reasonable doubt about that, you don't put a person on the Supreme Court. No one, I don't think any senator said that. All of them should have said it repeatedly.
If they had one witness who'd corroborated, he'd be dead. They couldn't come up with that.
They couldn't have one. How could they, Mickey? The only two people in the room were accused of doing it. How could they?
No, she'd come and confess to somebody right away, the way it has happened in other cases. That would have been enough. He would have been dead. They couldn't come up with that. Anyway, who knows? He may have done it. But all I'm saying is that the evidence amassed against him was not wildly impressive.
There was a lot of evidence consistent with the allegation. A totally credible testimony to out of control drunkenness in college. He was an out of control drunk. He was.
But that doesn't mean he did what Ford said he did, and what Ford said he did may have been, he may have been less bad than Ford remembers. Who knows?
This is my point. I'm not saying it means she was right. I'm saying it all increases the probability of her being right. And once you get to a very high percentage on that probability, the guy it's too risky to put him on the Supreme Court. That's the argument that Democrats should have made.
If he's the best guy you can nominate for the foreseeable future, and he's obviously going to be on his best behavior, that argument may not wash. So, I mean, the other candidates were much worse, and plus Trump wouldn't have time to appoint another one, and so there, if you think Kavanaugh's judging is okay, you wouldn't necessarily have to go along with that argument. Okay. There's a Biden boomlet right now, so everybody
let me tell you about Biden. And I should do the talking because your voice is getting more and more garbled. I fear it's getting to be like internet rush hour in California, and like all the kids are getting home from school and downloading their porn or something and interfering with your bandwidth.
Is this all because web neutrality got booted?
Net neutrality. And speaking of which, I just did a dialogue with Tim Wu, which people should watch, on antitrust law. He's the guy who came up with the phrase net neutrality.
Yeah.
But let me say quickly about Biden. He and Bernie Sanders are probably roughly the same age. Biden. I hate to say this, but should I not say this? Is this horrible? I don't think mentally he's aging. He's aging as well as Sanders. I think Biden has clearly lost in a way that's natural when you're in your 70s. I mean, we've all I'm old enough to have slowed down. You just slow down and you do it more and more. But I think Bernie Sanders is more closer to the top of his game mentally than Joe Biden is right now.
Although Joe Biden's top of his mental game was never quite as good as he thought it was.
Well, there's that too.
The problem with Biden, he thinks he's smart. He seems like a good man. He has the right instincts. He sort of has the right attitude, but he ain't as smart as he thinks he is. And if he's less smart than that, I don't know, that could be an advantage.
Who has a better chance against Trump, Biden or Sanders?
I don't know. I assume Biden.
I don't know.
It's hard to portray Biden as a.
All the polls showed that Sanders would have done better against Trump than Hillary did.
Right, but Biden historically polls terribly. So the test of Biden is not how he polls, because every time he thinks of running, they come up with these polls and they show that nobody likes him. So, but then he doesn't do badly once he's right. So I wouldn't trust the polls of Biden. I have one point I want to make about the overall Trump assessment. That's an important point. Everybody is saying the clear takeaway from this midterm election is we have two Americas. We have the booming economy of the coasts and the lagging economy of the hinterlands, and the coasts are Democratic now, and the hinterlands are Trump's base, and he's representing the people who have been left behind in today's economy. The grossest epithet for that was the coalition of the ascendant. That's Ron Brownstein's term for the Democratic coalition, and that leaves the coalition of the non-ascendant for Trump. And obviously there's a lot of truth to that. I never understood what's the point. The point is we should have more of the forces of globalism that have destroyed the non-ascendant parts of the country, so we screw them even more. They just lose. What are they supposed to do? Commit suicide? Go on opium? Now people like Paul Krugman and even Greg Sargent at the Washington Post are laudably saying, no, wait a minute, we need a strategy to help these people. And they wouldn't have had a voice without Trump. I'm very happy that Trump came along and gave them a voice.
That if you wanted to list, say good things about Trump, or at least about the consequences of Trump, yeah, I mean, they've gotten attention and they should get it. And it's called attention to the whole challenge of reconciling globalization with national coherence and with some degree of income and social equality in the United States. It is called attention to important issues. And also, although you and I disagree about immigration, it's called attention to the fact that, like it or not, immigration is a powerful political issue. And one way or another, you have to reckon with that reality, or else change the sentiment, one or the other.
You don't think immigration lowers wages in the areas where it competes?
No, I think it probably does. I mean, I think the aversion to it is probably exaggerated relative to its actual impact as compared to the impact of other things like automation and so on. But no, I think it does. And I'm not an open borders person. And one weird effect Trump has had is, I think, made some people reflexively kind of talk as if they're open borders when they would never have talked that way 10 years ago. I mean, if you just walked up to them and said, does a country, have the right to control its borders? And is it natural for a country to let some people in and not let other people in? I think everybody would have gone, well, yeah, isn't that the way all countries do it? But it's almost like, and it gets back to the psychology of tribalism. Trump is so polarizing that it's like, whatever he's against, I'm for 100%. So if he's against keeping any one person out of the country, I want that person in.
But the other interesting thing that's happened is it's refocused on the economy because the economic effect on the election was so obvious. So now you have people who have been saying, oh, it's not economic anxiety, it's racism. These people aren't economically anxious. Now Krugman wrote a column saying they're not economically anxious, but wait a minute, the problem has deep-seated roots in the economy, and they don't like, what they see in terms of the future and their place in it. Well, that's economic anxiety. So right. We're back to economic anxiety, which is a good thing.
Yeah, no, the whole it's racism, not economic anxiety thing, I think is mistaken in part because even sometimes when things wind up involving racism, and I'm not judging the extent to which they do here, but even when they do, that can be a kind of a mediating variable, and the root causes can be things like economics. I just wrote a thing about this in a little bit of a retort to Adam Serwer, who is 24/7 on the they're all racist front kind of. I mean, at least that's the subtext, I'd say. And we can link to that, but
he's not the energetic leftist who I like. I like Matt Stoller better. But
isn't Matt Stoller a little bit of a loose cannon himself? He used to be.
Yes, he's wandered a bit, but
back when he did that MyDD blog many years ago, he was a little bit extreme, wasn't he?
he's the guy who was so left that he would admit that the right had a point, which is my kind of lefty. But
is he the one who's now at the New America Foundation?
He's now at some pro-competitive foundation. So he's big on antitrust against Microsoft, I think, and Facebook and Google. So he's shifted a little.
Well, we should. Yeah, go ahead.
What was I going to say? We were talking about. Well, your position is basically the same as Obama's cling to their guns and God position, which he said if only they had good jobs or good wages, they wouldn't cling to their guns and God, which is probably bogus in terms of guns and God, but it's probably not bogus in terms of racism.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I agree with that, but I mean,
I agree. I mean, I think the extent to which it's involves racism in the kind of classic sense is exaggerated anyway. But
that's because we're both Marxists. We both think the economy is primary.
Yes, we do. So we should go partly because your voice does continue to deteriorate. I mean, not your voice itself, but it's the way it comes over into the thing that's recording it. What's that?
My mind is deteriorating.
Well, that's been going on for some time, but
becoming like Joe Biden.
Yeah, you're kind of the canary in the coal mine for Joe Biden, I'd say. You're one step ahead of him in cognitive decline. That's the way I look at you.
I thought he was one step ahead of me. Damn it. Okay.
I know this is the bad news I'm bringing you, and as we approach Thanksgiving.
Sure.
So, but quickly, the last thing is, you said that Sherrod Brown is feared on the right as a presidential candidate. So let me ask about some people, and you tell me whether they're feared or not. Elizabeth Warren.
She should be feared, but she's not.
You think she should be? I think she should not be.
I think she's smart and competent underneath all the bluster, and she should be feared.
I think she is smart and competent. But I think that genealogy thing. What?
Everybody hates to work with her, but she is smart and competent. So I think the right should fear her. But you saying they shouldn't?
I just think I think she's easy to paint as an extremist. And I think that DNA episode did not speak all that well of her political skill, I thought. The DNA test.
I don't think it turned out that badly for her. Everybody says it was such a disaster. Now we know the exact number, or we think we know the exact number, and the controversy's gone away because we know now it just becomes arguing whether 1/1024 is a big number or not. I think she effectively put it to rest. And keep in mind, the easier you are to caricature as a crazy person, the easier it is to puncture that. So you caricature Reagan as a crazy warmonger. He says something a little peacenik, and everybody goes, "Oh, I didn't see that side of Reagan," and he beats Jimmy Carter. So it's
right.
The two-sided coin there.
Right. Or you say Reagan is aging and losing it mentally, and he comes up with one good line in a debate.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, Kamala Harris.
I think she's too bland. She's so obviously doing like a play it safe, by the numbers, do everything you're supposed to do candidacy. I don't think that works. You have to have some bite.
And what was it? Well, she tried to provide bite in interrogating Kavanaugh, but nothing came of it. What was that whole deal? That it sounded like she had some goods on him, and then just nothing came of it.
I didn't follow it that closely.
It was weird. It was all over social media. Look at but then it turned out people were waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it never did. So who else? What are the other candidates people are talking about?
Fighting Kavanaugh is a by the numbers thing. The interesting thing to do would be support Kavanaugh. And everybody likes Amy Klobuchar, but people say she's not mean enough.
I don't think it takes mean to beat Trump next time. I really don't. I think it takes. I think return to normalcy is not that bad a slogan.
What about the argument that you need an entertainer to beat an entertainer?
If you're talking Michael Avenatti, please, God, no.
No, we were talking about it was a big mistake to get rid of Al Franken.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Al Franken would do if he were still viable. He wouldn't be bad, but
I mean, Cory Booker is at least entertaining.
Yeah. No, he's charismatic. I mean, on foreign policy, I'm not a fan of his, but there are few candidates Bernie is the only one whose foreign policy really commends itself to me. I'd love for Bernie to be president.
Okay, you were naming some more candidates. There's 3,000 of them, so you got a long way to go.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm running out of juice. I had my coffee too long ago.
Okay.
Also, I got to get in the car and drive to Connecticut for Thanksgiving.
Now you've given a timestamp to this, Bob.
I already told people we recorded before Thanksgiving, but since you and I deal only in timeless truths, that's not a problem.
Okay.
And it'll appear the Monday after Thanksgiving, or maybe the Sunday night after Thanksgiving. We'll see.
Okay, no.
So thank you. Now, Mickey, I am going to immediately steer you to some very inexpensive technology, which would lead our next encounter to involve more in the way of people actually being able to hear what you say.
I don't understand. I have this very expensive, good microphone here. Why can't we use that?
The microphone's not the problem. The bandwidth is, dude. It's that you refuse to have Wi-Fi in your apartment.
Well, that just means I have to pay Verizon more money to get more bandwidth. That's all.
No, it means you need to buy a splitter so that you can plug the Ethernet directly into your computer at the same time you're plugging the camera.
I can buy a splitter. I can do that.
Yeah, we're going to steer you to and we're going to pick up the $7 for this one.
I'll believe that when I see it. Okay.
Trust me. Okay, well, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving. Retroactive.
Same to you, Bob.
Okay.
Yes. Talk to you soon.